Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Reardon. I'm president of National Audubon Society, and welcome to this evening's program, Sailing from Iceland to Greenland. Nunkatuk wishes to honor the indigenous communities native to the chapter area, including the Pagusset, Wepawag, Quinnipiac, Tuttakat, Nunkatuk, and Hammonasset people. As we advocate for the conservation of the land and its wildlife, we're indebted to the work of the native and indigenous people who cherished the land for thousands of years before European colonization. We have some programs coming up, which I'll put in the chat and then in the follow-up email tomorrow. But let's get started with tonight's program. John Hannan is a 40-year veteran of nonprofit world. He's been part of Audubon family at all levels. On the staff, he was at National, helping launch the America's Flyway Strategy fundraising efforts, and he was part of the planning team for the Atlantic Flyway Shorebird Conservation Business Plan. In New York, he's the past chair of Audubon New York State Council of Chapters and past and president of Bedford Audubon. During the presentation, please mute yourselves and put your questions in the chat or save them for the end of the program when you can unmute yourself. And now, welcome, John.
Thank you, Dennis. And thanks to everybody for who's tuning in. I'm glad there's a lot of interest in both voyaging to Iceland and to Greenland. So I'm just going to ask Dennis, how do I go about, I guess, where there's share?
Yeah. We're all
And
set.
we're all set. Terrific. So the subcontext of my trip was 10 days immersed in nature, reflecting on clash of culture, history, politics, and climate. Because when you're out on a boat sailing on the ocean for 10 days, you get a lot of time to think as well as to see. So uh, it truly the people who run these trips, Adventure Canada and National Geographic and many of the others, they do like to call them expeditions rather than cruises or anything else because you're exploring, you're thinking, discussing with those who you're traveling with. And so it's a great experience and a great way to really kind of focus oneself. So without further ado, I'll get into it. Um, why travel north rather than going to Ecuador or Costa Rica, where you'll see probably 200 to 300 more species? And the I've always wanted to see the northern breeding birds in their splendid breeding plumage. It's true. I think we only had about 48 species of birds and 10, 15 mammals. But you see them in a way that's unlike any other time. We do get redneck pharaoh, the bird there in my left-hand corner, but hardly ever do I see them with a red neck. And sometimes, those of us that are chasers of birds will see that there's a tufted duck somewhere out in Bridgeport or Stratford, and we have to run out there and look through 1,000 scaup and ringnecks, and if we're lucky, a drab hen in the middle of them all. Whereas in the northern latitudes, you're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of these breeding birds in full plumage, male, female, young, and it's a fabulous way to not only experience the birds, but also the beauty of northern latitudes. It's a landscape unlike any other. And in the summer, when most of us would be traveling there, it's 23 hours of light, and it's just amazing. And then also in places like Greenland, especially, understanding the complexities of building just societies, governmental policies that respect, as Dennis brought up, the way your chapter does, the culture and the history of First Nation people, and how do you work in sovereignty in what's constantly an ever more complex global economy. And then finally, and most importantly, perhaps much more so than just seeing the breeding birds, but understanding how climate change is impacting these northern latitudes and how that will eventually impact us here in the New England and Mid-Atlantic states. So I always refer on these trips to the team because it takes the whole village, if you will, to put it together. Um, I went It was 2.5 years ago. I was still working at BirdLife International. BirdLife International, like Audubon, sponsors travel. They have what's called a rare bird club, members who are dedicated to birds and conservation, and they offer trips as part of that group. So we work very closely with an expedition group called Adventure Canada. They're a wonderful group of people. It's literally a marriage of um, some Cree people and Canadian Brits of British descent. Both families were expedition leaders, and by coincidence and luck, they had a marriage of two of them, and it pulled all of the resources of both families, and they offer these fabulous trips uh, to really learn, to immerse yourself, as I said, in nature and in the questions that nature and today's environmental questions put challenges put forth to us. And we were very lucky. Margaret Atwood, the poet, the author, is also a member of the BirdLife Advisory Board and a great supporter of Adventure Canada. So once a year, she goes on these trips, and she chose our expedition to go with us. So it was a terrific added benefit being able to be with her. She hosted a poetry contest one night. She participated in karaoke another night. So it was everything from very strong, hard political discussions to crazy contests. Where did we go? The trip itinerary started in Reykjavik. We flew into Iceland. A lot of these expeditions, they do ask you arrive at least a day early so that your travel, if a flight's canceled or whatever, you'll still be able to get on the boat because the boat leaves and there's no getting to it once that's happened. So we pulled in a day early, some people a little bit earlier than that. And if you're ever getting a chance to go out to Iceland, which I highly recommend, give yourself a few days because it's a fabulous country. It is just got an amazing resource. I'll get into it more in a second. But then we left Reykjavik. We were on the ocean. We then ended up heading into, and you can see the little blue and red points, the southeastern part of Greenland, cutting through the fjord, going up along the coast, the southwestern coast of Greenland, and then getting into the central part. And I'll touch on all of those in more detail as we go through it. So, as I said, go to Iceland. Air Iceland has, developed this great deal, cheap flights to Europe, and they always have you stay at least a day in Iceland when you take those flights, but really stay a few days, if not a week. Reykjavik is a wonderful city. It's cosmopolitan, but it's also ancient. It was established back in 874. It truly welcomes ecotourism. That is a massive component because people come to see the volcano. They come to see, if you circumvent Iceland, you will see I guess, the largest breeding colony of puffins in the Atlantic Ocean. Um, but even on the southern, just off of the coast of Reykjavik, there are breeding colonies of puffins. Um, it's considered one of the greenest cities on Earth because of the geothermal energy that powers all of its energy sources. And it's just, when I got there, I had the day. Some people were going out to see the volcano. Some people were going to the mud baths. A couple friends were going to drive a few hours to a beautiful national park. I had just been in the plane for 6 hours, so I said, I'm just going to take this $10 Uber out to the end of the coast, the easternmost point of Reykjavik, and walk for a number of hours. And it was absolutely beautiful. Breeding colony of Arctic terns, black-tailed godwits, purple sandpipers, common eiders. I watched for an hour where hundreds of Arctic terns were just going back and forth, getting the bait fish, bringing them back to the nest. Um, just a wonderful place to spend a few days. Um, the city, it's a city bustling with commerce. It's a lot of tourism based, bars, restaurants, but it's also a bird haven. And I know I don't pronounce any of these names correctly, but Pond, which is right in the city center, it's just filled with Eurasian widgeon, graylag goose, whooper swans, and just were outside of the city in that coastal spot I was referencing, redneck loons, redshank, all hundreds of common eiders breeding. Just, it's a fabulous haven of birds all around. And then the next morning, we went down to the dock and we were introduced to our home away from home, the Ocean Endeavor, Adventure Canada's main expedition boat. It's like a lot of the boats that do Arctic and Antarctic travel. It's not a real icebreaker, but it's been custom retrofitted. It's a double hull, so it can glide through ice. It can take the intricacies of ice-choked waters. It's a medium-sized boat. Nat Geo has a smaller one. I think now Adventure Canada also has a smaller one, but it's got 198 guest capacity, uh, which is still, you still don't feel like you're on, what, giant Carnival cruise or something. And what's most important, and I think most of the expedition companies do this, but Venture Canada does it really well. It's staffed with experts in all the areas. We had geologists. We had someone who is one of the foremost experts on First Nation law and government policy. We had his wife, actually, who's an expert in marine mammals, and she was up on the bridge almost 24/7, looking for marine mammals, um, calling them out for all those of us that stayed up there all the time. And then there was other people that we had an Inuit couple, and every night they gave a presentation on a part of their culture. There's an archaeologist on the boat. So when we actually got off, um, if we stumbled upon any kind of grave site or any kind of historic or religious stones, whatever, she would point them out and ask people to respect the area, not go in if need be, etc. So they really take care of offering you insights into all of the parts of the travel, um, and also insights into the culture that you're coming upon. Uh, and then, of course, on the adventure and the birding and nature experiential part, these boats are filled with kayaks, with Zodiacs, and every other imaginable toy that you could get out on the water and get close to nature with. Um, we were leaving the beginning of July, and it took us an extra couple hours to get out of the harbor. And they explained the reason being that we were going to Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, and we would actually be in mid-July, the last boat that had guaranteed access. So they were bringing about 6 months worth of supplies to Nuuk. Uh, and it was great because we were up on the bridge and it gave us a chance to see northern fulmars, gannets, black-headed gulls, puffins, a whole suite of birds that were using the harbor. The ocean crossing takes about 2 days. You're leaving at, 4 or 5 in the afternoon, the full day out on the water, and then the next day you get to Greenland about 3 or 4. So it's more or less 2 days, and it's a fabulous 2 days. If you don't like being up on the bridge, which I loved because it allowed me to see long-tailed Jaeger, black-legged kittiwake, greater shearwater. As we got closer to land, the glaucous gull, a whole suite of whales. I believe those are minkies that are there. We had blue whale, we had humpback whales, pilot whales, we had dolphins, and as I said, we had an expert calling them out. Plus, they every year have a young person who is starting their career in oceanography or ocean mammals who gets to be on the trip, and instead of paying their way or getting just their scholarship is that their way is paid, but they're up there scanning the waters looking for the mammals and calling them out for the guests. So it's a really wonderful way of going about. And now we hit about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the southeastern side of Greenland. And if you've never been, I really encourage you, find a way to get yourself there because especially within the next 10, 15 years, because right now there I've never seen anything like it. It is just amazing to start reaching an area that is, first of all, a sea of ice. All the landscape, as far as the eye can see, is ice covered and snow covered. And also, you're looking at, I think it's the second largest island after Australia, and an entire coastline that only has 3,000 people on it. And they're in just two areas so that you're just looking at pristine nature. Uh, they you out in the Zodiacs, and you actually go through these channels where the ice is broken. You've got dovekies on one side, hooded seal on another, Pomeranian Jaegers who are flying over, hoping to be able to get a fulmar or something that isn't watching. And you go through. We were hoping for polar bear, but the ice was actually too thick for us to get close enough for the polar bears. We did find signs of them. Unfortunate for a couple seals. We found the remains of what polar bears had made dinner of. But it's really the landscape that is so striking. Um, and so all that night we sailed through this sea of ice, and in that lower corner picture, my right, you can see we that's one of the things about being in 23 hours of sunlight. You really don't know when to go to bed, and you never want to because it's so beautiful out there. So we just stayed up on the bridge watching the captain navigate slowly but surely through all of this ice, um, which is an amazing feat. You always, because you know that the polar bears are a little closer and maybe the narwhals and stuff, you're hoping he's can go a little bit closer, but he was a very smart captain, and he got us through the sea of ice to the fjord, which is the open water that you see on our my left hand side lower corner. Another boat 2 weeks later was a little more adventuresome and went closer into shore, and literally the this is how the environment changes so quickly. They got frozen in, and I think it took them almost a week before they could get the boat free of the ice that had within just hours frozen all around them. So those folks were stuck in one place. Hope they had a lot of good birds there. But Greenland is just it's amazing sailing through these fjords because in total there's only 56,000, 57,000 people on the whole island. So you go for hours with absolutely no human footprint anywhere. Uh, Fjords are incredibly clean water, so there isn't a lot of plankton, so there's not that much fish, so there's not a great deal of birds just swooping all around you, which takes getting used to. But it's the landscape that just leaves you in awe every second of the way. You're seeing icebergs breaking up, flipping over. You're seeing ice fields that are cracking and changing. Uh, they get you out on the Zodiacs, and every morning they check with their team. The team goes out. They've got places where they know where there's nesting birds. They'll go into these little bays and check them out, and then they'll choose spots. And so we would go onto the Zodiacs, the the staff, the members, they go first. And on those ridge lines that you're looking at in the right upper corner, they set up the polar bear watch. So we had to go through training, but you you've got staff that are ringed all around you, and you're allowed to hike within that area. Um, and they're up there with whistles and with shotguns. And if they see a polar bear, they'll start whistling, and everybody gets together. If the polar bear becomes aggressive, they will shoot warning shots. Um, but we were unlucky in that we never got to see a polar bear, but we saw lots of polar bear footprints. And so it's pretty amazing. You're just out there and you're with the birds who are crouched in all of these rocky crevices. So snow buntings, Lapland longspurs, out on the water, black guillemots, and all everything is just they only have 3 months. They're out of there so quickly, but it's this constant uh don't know how to express it as well as Margaret Atwood would be able to in her poetry, but the green springs out on you, and the birds are constantly feeding, they're constantly eating. So everything is so live and vibrant while you're there. And everything is just large. You know, people talk about going to Montana and Big Sky, Montana. Montana has nothing on the tundra because you're just looking at these vast expanses. Uh, the boat would be offshore. We'd jump in the Zodiacs. We'd land, as I had mentioned. There was folks who had landed ahead of us to scope it out, make sure we weren't going to run into a polar bear right off the bat. Um, and then you're walking on this spongy tundra, and you could only do a mile, but you'd feel like, wow, I've really hiked because it just you just sink into it, and that is where the birds are disappearing into, building their nests along all of that rocky crags. And then up on the lake, you're finding common loons. It's just an absolutely beautiful place. And once again, seeing Lapland longspurs in total full breeding plumage, red poles like we don't see them down here, just absolutely amazing. And then, as I mentioned, because we also were taking time to think about culture and how the people of Greenland lived and are now living. We visited both Viking and Inuit villages and spots. Eric the Red is credited with being the first European to settle into Greenland. In fact, he's credited with calling the place Greenland. And he did it because he had been expelled. He was not a very nice person. He, in fact, got himself expelled from two different settlements in Europe and one in Iceland. He got into fights with his neighbors and murdered them. And even the Vikings, who were pretty used to pillaging, didn't like him and told him that he had two choices. One was he could get his head cut off and it would be impaled on a pole with him upside down, or he could sail away. And so he took option two and he settled down in southwestern Greenland. And his wife actually adopted Christianity, and that chapel that's in the right hand corner, my right hand corner, he built for her. Um, and then Vikings and Inuits tended to live in the what you're seeing on my left hand corner, building or structures, I should say, that are built into the natural mounds of the ground. And as I'm guessing most of you would imagine, that's because it protects you from the winters. Um, they didn't want to bother building houses. They wanted to build something that was as warm as possible. There would be a chimney in the center. It was a smoky existence in the winter. I'm sure a lot of people developed emphysema and lung disease. But that is how folks lived. Um, and the area in those late spring and early summer months is just filled with northern wheat ear, snow buntings, and all birds that are nesting down in the grasses. They pop up, they're constantly eating bugs, and then they disappear again. Uh, but it's an extraordinarily beautiful landscape. Um, the Eric the Red, his son was Leif Erikson, who then developed, or I should say, is credited with coming out and finding himself in Newfoundland, and even some say, I guess, he got as far as Rhode Island. Uh, but when the Vikings left, the Inuit took over these areas, and now they use them and they farm sheep. Um, it's a tough life, though. It really is. You're you've got 3 months of productive um, agriculture, and then you're settling in for the winter. So one night, the Inuit couple told us that Eric the Red had called the place Greenland. Um, they call it in their language the place where people don't bathe. And I thought, well, maybe I would go with Greenland if I was trying to build a tourism base, but uh, basically because the winters and the waters are so cold, people didn't bathe a lot. But what they did find were hot water spas and hot water because the geothermal is pushing steam up and making these wonderful, very warm pools that you can dive into. So we stopped at a few of them. That one in my left hand or my right hand corner is one of the most famous. It's a beautiful view of the bay and the fjord and the icebergs, and you're just sitting in this 100-degree hot water, and all around you, once again, snow buntings, northern wheat ear, All of I think I can't see it because the names of folks, but I think then also the Lapland Longspur once again. Um, just a wonderful, wonderful landscape to be a part of. And then as you sail further up, you're actually getting to the capital, which is Nuuk. I think that's the proper pronunciation. Um, it's an old harbor. It's now an international airport city. It has one third of the population of the island. About 20,000 people live there. It's a hub for art, for tourists who come shopping, looking for the pubs and the cafes. It's got a beautiful museum. Um, it has a lot of you provides you with the ability to really learn more about Inuit culture and uh, and sometimes there are clashes. We were told the Inuit still hunt whale and walrus and seal, so they will sell artwork that comes from the ivory of the tusks and the likes. Um, we cannot buy any of that because entering back into the US or Canada would be against regulations, but it is a part of their culture. If you do go to restaurants that are celebrating local cuisine, you may have puffin on the menu. It in a society where you are living very much on the edge of because of the climate and the environment. It is, you utilize every resource that is at hand. Um, we had a lot of discussions about sovereignty because there is a strong movement within Greenland to actually completely separate from Denmark, um, and what that would entail, what kind of natural resources would have to be used to build a fully local economy. Um, but it it is an amazing, beautiful location, the colorful houses, the you know being the people say, oh, and this is the very densely populated part of the country, and yet there's only 19,000, 20,000 people. It's a fabulous spot, and you've got whales right offshore. You have so much nature, and so then we've continued to travel, and we're probably one of the last groups that made this exodus. We went up to, and I'm almost positive that I'm completely butchering the name, but Kangerlusk Fjord to fly out of the airport there. Um, that airport actually has been closed to civilian traffic since last year. Uh, it was originally an Allied air base that was created in World War II. It now serves as part of the NATO and Danish air defense operations. I think also there's some US shared operations there. Um, it's a beautiful area. You go up this incredible fjord where my lower left-hand corner, those little black dots you're seeing are actually, it was a massive iceberg that was floating down, and those were all black-legged kittiwakes that were just hanging out on the iceberg. And then they were getting harassed by Pomeranian Jaeger. Um, it's not uncommon to see musk in that area. There, it's where Adventure Canada actually resumes for some people who are just newly arriving or some who are continuing. to go further up into the Arctic Circle in search of polar bear, Sabine's gull, ivory gull, and even, species of the far northern Arctic. Um, but ironically, what is causing that airport to be closed to civilian traffic is if it were to be expanded, the permafrost is starting to melt there with climate change. And they're going to have to do extensive repairs if they were to continue as a civilian airport. So they've decided to consolidate all civilian and tourism um, flights into the Nuuk airport. So once again, a reminder of just how much climate is affecting our friends in the northern parts. And that brings me to what we learned. Um, and for many on this webinar, this isn't going to be any news other than reinforcement of what you already knew. Um, the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Uh, it's a fact. Uh, while the Earth's average temperature has increased by 1 degree Fahrenheit over the past century, uh, I guess per year, Greenland has increased by about 7 degrees since 1991. The Greenland's ice sheet blankets about 80% of their land surface. Uh, but in recent decades, the ice is getting thinner and the glaciers are retreating at an ever increasing rate. The geologist and the climatologist that were on the trip with us, their lecture was sobering. Um, they reinforced the fact that I backed up. I went on World Wildlife Fund's site. The glaciers are melting 6 or 7 times faster today than they were 25 years ago. They showed us pictures of the same glacier that you're looking at in my upper right-hand corner. Um, 2 or 3 years ago, that glacier was all the way up the mountainside. Now it's almost just lost a quarter of its size. And that's happening in real time, constantly. We're just seeing an ever increasing rapidness of loss of permafrost, loss of glacier, loss of habitat for the species that depend on that kind of habitat for their natural life. The ones who are right in the bullseye in the target range: polar bears, walrus, Arctic fox, narwhals in the water, reindeers, our wonderful visitors from the north, snowy owls. They are all being critically impacted by this change. And so are we, because all of that water is melting, going into the oceans, warming the oceans, rising sea level, uh, and we cannot keep on sticking our heads in the sand. This is happening real time, and it's going to have massive impacts. And I know most everybody on this call probably has already read plenty, so that I don't need to convince you. But it when you go up into the Arctic, it really reinforces and you see it for yourself. And in the politics and the culture, um, I guess the you can sum it up in one sentence, and that is this this is complex. Um, Inuit leaders, organizations across not just Greenland, but across uh, the Arctic Circle, and we saw it. Those of us that went to the leadership conference for Audubon with many of the Canadian First Nation folks, they have stressed their right to self-determination, the desire to reclaim their culture, their languages, their institutions, and in Greenland, eventual independence. But then the question is, how do you do that in a global economy? Uh, how do you pay for healthcare? How do you pay for education? All of the things that you want to bring to your people, um, that are controlled in multinational corporate settings. So it was really, really interesting to listen to the person who was an academic who brought those kinds of insights, the Inuit people that were on the boat with us, talking from their point of view, um, and then really trying to think through how do you do this in our country and in Canada, in tribal lands where there is a certain amount of autonomy, but there's the difference in philosophy within First Nation folks, Pequot, who have made very strong economic advances through their casinos, through their tourism. Others who have said we don't want that, and yet then somewhat suffer on some of the places that they've lived. Others who, especially many that we met in Canada, who have very large stretches of land and so have a better standard of living and ability to live as they've wanted to, just because of the amount of natural resources at their disposal. But these are really challenging questions, and from my point of view, no clear, straight, black and white answers. It really does take us being empathetic, being listeners, and being willing to have a long dialogue to get to the right place. And unfortunately, right now, our political leaders are probably not doing any of that. Um, since the 19th century, the US has tried to purchase Greenland at various times, to claim international water rights for military defensive posturing, um, and for the natural resources that people think are under the ground, both along the coast and under the ice. Um, just this August, the Danish government called in the top U.S. diplomat in Copenhagen because they uncovered that there were people in Greenland with U.S. citizens with connections to Donald Trump and the Trump administration, conducting influencer campaigns, trying to disrupt the political process that is democratic and sovereign in Greenland. So we have to be vigilant to what is going on in our name, and what we really want to be done in our name. Uh, I don't think that there is any, and this is personal, but I don't think there is any good reason for the United States to own or dominate Greenland. Uh, the Inuit would prefer to do it themselves. They are working it out with the Danes. We don't need another country coming in and making it even more complex and confusing. And finally, how, for those who are interested, how do you stay connected with these issues and actually be an active participant in positive change? And we're very lucky, and you've probably gotten this spiel, many of you, uh, but our network, our National Audubon Strategic Flight Plan, has already identified many areas in the Americas, in the north as well as our our own country, and then south of our border, that's strategic. That and it amounts to about 3.7 billion acres right now of key ecoregions that we can help and we can support, in places. Greenland's not on our National Audubon strategy. Uh, Canadian North is, and then our own Alaska, obviously. Uh, One easy way is ecotourism, putting dollars into those places. and into the communities that are doing conservation. Uh, Volunteering with international partners is another. There is a BirdLife partner. National Audubon is part of the BirdLife Global Bird Conservation Partnership. There's an Iceland BirdLife organization. There's a Danish BirdLife organization that also does work in Greenland. And then our Canadian partners, Birds Canada and Nature Canada, working together with them on the projects. Um, and it could mean financially supporting projects, it could mean volunteering on the projects. And in some cases, it could even mean assisting with training and supplying equipment. So those are all ways in which we can actually very actively take part in conservation beyond our community, but it benefits our community because many of the migratory species that either stop here on their migratory path or in some part of their life cycle are also in the north as well. And for those who are excited to go, see a polar bear, see an ivory gull, see a bar-tailed godwit, um, there's plenty of opportunities. Your very own member, Gina Nichols and her Sunrise Birding has a trip next year that goes to Norway. And I looked at the itinerary and I'm already jealous of Gina. It's an amazing trip. It takes you into a different part of the northern latitudes, but once again, the incredible landscapes and incredible wildlife that uses these beautiful northern landscapes. Um, my friends at Adventure Canada have the Iceland to Greenland trip every year. They call it In the Wake of the Vikings. In 2026, it's in June 28th, I guess, to July 10th. And then National Audubon is working with another group, Travel HX. They they are doing many different trips, but one that caught my eye is circumventing Spitsbergen. And I have friends who have done this trip, and it's almost guaranteed that you will see polar bear, you will see muskox, you will see walrus. It's an incredible, incredible part of the world. Um, I can't emphasize enough, and I didn't think this until I got up there, but just experiencing the Arctic landscape, the Arctic summer, seeing sort of the daily routine of the wildlife that lives there and how this cycle of they land and literally they're there with a mission. Build a nest, get strong enough to breed, get those chicks out of the nest, and then feed them. And just all those pictures you saw of birds with large moths, with insects. It's just this frenzy, and the frenzy mirrors the way the tundra turns green for those months. Everything just comes alive for this massive spurt, and then off they go and they feed the rest of the world because they disperse to all parts. Uh, we have the birds that are coming down and spending winter with us. We have birds that like red knots that are going all the way down to Argentina. So it's this incredible nursery and breeding area that just bubbles over with life for these 3, 4 months. And the sunlight, 23 hours, it just it really gives you that sense of wonder and awe at how nature is so good at balancing itself. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and entertain any questions that you all have.
Thanks, John. That was fascinating. We had a couple comments in the chat. Let's see. Peter, you want to unmute yourself and talk about your adventure? And
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we were on a Viking cruise to Iceland, and all of a sudden, we were passing all these icebergs. We were told we couldn't get into Greenland because there was too much ice at the end of June. So we skipped it. But as we're looking at the windows, all of a sudden, I see a man in like a little rowboat practically, and he had a gun and he was out there hunting for seals, and that's how they feed themselves. So that was pretty fascinating. And it was so beautiful up there. Anybody needs to go to Iceland and Greenland. I just go. It's wonderful.
It truly is. You're right. You will find these hunters that are just out in the ice. And you're like, how the heck did you get out here? And how are
Yeah,
you
I was
getting
like amazed. Like, where did you come from?
yeah. And more importantly, how are you getting back?
I guess rode back with his seal.
Yep. But yes, and once again, we're visitors. That might not be how we would, envision dealing with seals and the likes, but these folks, this is a balanced. There's only 3,000 people on that whole eastern shoreline, and so this is how they live. Um,
But anybody who wants to go to Iceland, go like in August because you can't guarantee you'll get into Greenland because of the ice.
yeah, yep. As I said, we were there in July, and the next boat after us, they went a little too close to land, and they got frozen in overnight.
Wow.
Um,
That was great. Thank you.
All right. How about Robin? You want to expand on your comment?
Yeah, I've done a number of trips in the Arctic, including Svalbard and um, Adventure Canada along Greenland. And I went long enough ago that when we were in Kangerlussuaq, uh, got to go out in a small plane out over the ice sheet, which was even at that point, what, 6 years ago, melting, and there were these incredible pools on the ice sheet. Uh, that was fascinating. Another place to look at is northern Baffin Island, and
hmm,
I've camped on the sea ice, and there were Inuit hunting both whales and seals just down the ice sheet from us, and we were kayaking around icebergs, and they were out with their guns shooting things. So it's something that you deal with when you're in a different area.
right, right,
But
and kayaking through the icebergs is just absolutely amazing, isn't it?
it is just incredible. I've got photographs that are just amazing of kayaking through icebergs off of Baffin Island. And the island just north of us, which we could not land on, is a breeding area for snowy owls.
Ah,
So
beautiful.
it is limited. But we were woken up each morning, and I use the quotes morning because it didn't ever get dark. Uh, we had snow buntings that woke us up every day,
Yeah,
and always had someone with a gun just keeping an eye out 24/7 for polar bears.
right, right. Yes, you you can't you, you can't get warm and fuzzy about polar bears. They
No, no. And I'm lucky enough to have seen, well, this was Svalbard, uh, a polar bear eating a seal on an ice raft at midnight. And the captain eventually had to call us back to the boat because even the guides didn't want to leave. But
yeah.
we had to keep moving. But it was fascinating.
No, it is such an incredible landscape and so different from anything that we encounter. It really makes us pause and hopefully really say, "Wow, this is all worth protecting." We really need to up our game.
Yeah, I love the Arctic. And I'm going to Iceland next year.
Oh, fabulous.
Thanks, Robin. Anybody else have a question? John, thank you so much.
Oh, no,
Uh,
happy.
Way different from anything we've had before. So thanks a lot.
No, and yeah, as I said, there's so many great trips and groups. Um, I always love to be able to cheer for the home team. Gina Nichols and Sunrise has fabulous trips planned. Um, Adventure Canada, it's almost like a family, these ships, because a lot of folks are retired academics or still working academics, nature lovers. They're in the when we're going from place to place, not everybody is obsessed with birds as I am, so they're down in the lectures. I'm up on the bridge. Uh, but you really learn a lot, and then the evenings are just hilarious. These karaoke and the poetry. What do you call it when the poetry contest,
Hey,
poetry bash
Slam.
or something? Yeah, it's poetry slam. And people came dressed up and Margaret Atwood is teasing everybody and getting the crowd going. So really, really, they're great experiences. And as everybody who just spoke, they give you insights into a world that is just out there waiting for us to see it and to protect it. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Check the email tomorrow for upcoming programs and sign up on the website through Mobilize. And take care, everybody.